All right. Good afternoon, Garrett, Craig. Thank you so much for joining me today to talk about your upcoming session at the Alzheimer's Association International Conference. It's really exciting to get to have some time with you and learn a little bit more about your research and what we can expect at the sessions. But first, I really would love to learn a little bit more about each of you and how you got into your work. How did you end up doing this type of research and end up in statistics? So, Garrett, let's talk with you. Can you give me a little bit of background, please? I'd love to learn more about how you got here.
Yeah, I'm relatively newer in the field, and I'm got into clinical trials and statistics because I love asking questions and I love math. I In school I enjoyed learning the tools that statistics gave you and answering questions about the world and about things around you. And clinical trials provides a way to ask questions using several gold standards, like the randomization and the double-blind procedures. Those are principles that really enhance how we ask questions uh, about certain things. And I want to make a difference in this world. And I got into clinical trials in Alzheimer's disease to try to assist that.
Well, it's, such a compelling and important field. And you would talk about a area of research that's going to touch millions of lives. So thank you for the work that you're doing. And how about you, Craig? What drew you to this field?
My initial academic training was in genetics, which is a discipline that involves both biology and statistics. We used statistics to answer important questions in genetics, and I really became enthused about the use of statistics as this tool to answer important questions. So I gravitated more and more toward the statistical field and got involved in clinical research, first in academia, but then in large and mid-sized pharma, and along the way had a lot of research experience in psychiatry, immunology, and eventually neurology, where I began working in Alzheimer's disease. And along the way, the companies I worked for, we hired Pentara to help us with our research. And over the years, I had so much fun working with Suzanne and colleagues at Pentara. I thought instead of working with them, I should work for them. And so I joined Pentara about 3 years ago to continue my work in the neurology, predominantly in the neurology area, and it has been a lot of fun along the way.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for the work that you're doing. And I want to dig right into this. So, your upcoming session is entitled Leveraging Recent Advances in Biomarkers to Optimize Early Phase Drug Development in Alzheimer's Disease. And I'd love to just start with the most important word I think in that title is biomarkers. And can you just set the stage for us to help us understand what does this mean in this recent advances in biomarkers? What are we talking about with this?
Biomarkers are a relatively newer a newer tool in the diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. Historically, the true diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease has been using a post-mortem brain autopsy. And we've tried to get at ways to understand the progression of Alzheimer's disease before someone passes away, and we've used functional and cognitive assessments. And recently, we've had a lot of focus on biomarkers, which are measures of the amount or state of something in your body. This can be through your blood, a PET scan, and they measure certain proteins. These are ways at getting a more uh, objective or sensitive way of measuring Alzheimer's disease progression.
Wow, that's a really important breakthrough to actually be able to diagnose Alzheimer's before someone has passed away with a tool other than just the cognitive assessment test. Because I know, there's different tests. There's questions about which ones are more valid than others, and there's not just one single test that's done. So this sounds like it's going to be a really important breakthrough. Craig, from looking at it from that pharmaceutical lens and that part of your history, how do you think this is going to be exciting for the drug development part of the world?
Well, I think there's several different areas that we can look to. At the end stage, we might think about greater opportunities for regulatory approvals, greater confidence in the research. Payers may be more accepting of results if they have greater confidence in the diagnosis, greater risk benefit profiles if we're very sure that the patients we're enrolling in our trials or treating with our drugs truly have the disease. So that's kind of at the end of the process. What our current research focuses a lot on is at earlier stages of the research process. By having these biomarkers, which we can gather now in a cheaper, easier fashion, more cost effective, more time efficient, it opens the door for alternatives in clinical trial design and clinical trial analysis, such as getting earlier reads on dose response, better abilities to pick the optimum dose for later phase research. And so by putting these pieces together, we can optimize the early phase research, which sets the stage for more convincing and compelling late stage research. And it's the marrying together of the biomarkers, the design, and the analysis, which together makes a compelling picture. But it all starts with the biomarker. If we've got the right assessment to ensure patients have the disease, and if we have a cost-effective and cheap way to monitor the disease more rapidly than the relatively blunt cognitive assessments, then we're going to have greater confidence in our results. We're going to get those results cheaper and in a more time-efficient manner. That's going to help everybody in the field. And eventually, we're not sure which drugs are going to eventually be successful. But what we are sure of is that if we've got better tools to assess the disease and diagnose the disease, we're going to have a better chance to come up with meaningful new treatments that will truly change a person's long-term prospects with Alzheimer's disease.
Thank you. I'd love to piggyback on that, Garrett. Looking at one particular biomarker, the plasma phospho-tau, it has been out in the research and in the news lately about its breakthroughs, and I think it offers some compelling advantages. So from your perspective, also, what do you think is going to be the most exciting finding about how that is also going to make these clinical trials faster, more powerful, and ultimately more efficient? Piggybacking on Craig's perspective, how are you feel that's going to influence the efficacy and the speed at which we can get to treatments?
That is a great question. There are two things that come to mind when I think about plasma p-tau with what we've done recently for our research. It's the time and the cost. These biomarkers the more accurate they are, it opens up the door for leveraging early phase trials, and that streamlining that process earlier can save a lot of time and set up yourself for better success and more time saved later in the clinical trials pipeline. The other thing is the cost. A lot of biomarkers have relied on either a PET scan or a lumbar puncture, which can be very costly or very scary. And this relies on a blood draw, which is much more accessible and much cheaper.
So it sounds like it's not only going to make the process more efficient and effective, it's going to reduce the costs of bringing drugs through trials, and then also reduce the burden on patients. It sounds like,
Yes.
Going in for a standard blood draw sounds like you said a lot less scary than going in for that venous lumbar or the lumbar puncture. Sorry. All right. So thank you for that. That was really helpful. And Craig, I wanted to follow that up with what kind of crucial insight would someone who is interested in the futures of Alzheimer's treatment gain by attending your session on plasma phospho-tau and its potential to accelerate new therapies? What can I expect to learn when I attend?
You'll learn several important things. First of all, we'll present some evidence which shows our current state of belief about how predictive plasma p-tau is of real clinical endpoints. You'll also hear a little bit about the additional information that sponsors would need to collect in their own clinical trials to further substantiate the reliability of plasma p-tau in their specific clinical trial instance. In addition to that, then with this new understanding about how plasma p-tau can be a more efficient and very reliable early biomarker, others will learn how then to use this knowledge and incorporate more efficient clinical trial designs and more efficient clinical trial analyses to see how breakthroughs from several different areas can be combined together through the assessment, design, and analysis of early phase trials. But it begins with the biomarker by having this new assessment tool that's cheaper and easier to gather. It opens the door for the other design options we talk about in our research, as well as the other analytic options that we talk about. So it's putting the pieces together that I think attendees at our session will really benefit from the most. But again, it all starts with the biomarker. That opens the door to the other things, but it's putting the pieces together that really completes the picture. And that's what we really hope attendees come away from is not just an understanding of where plasma p-tau fits in, but because of that, what they can do in their own research to make research more tractable and make the results more reliable and more believable.
Outstanding. And Garrett, I know you've in the past have voiced interest in, up and coming researchers and connecting with those future professionals. What are you hoping that, if I'm early in my career or I'm a graduate student working in this space, that I might be able to glean from this session also?
Yeah, I remember when I would first learn about a biomarker and its uses, I wanted to know how does it behave? In what populations does it do this and that? What we're trying to focus on is painting a clearer picture on p-tau plasma. There's been a lot of excitement about it recently, especially with the FDA's recent approval of the blood test of the ratio of beta amyloid 42 and p-tau 217. We hope to paint more of a picture around plasma p-tau and describe how this tool can be used in clinical trials. Um, that's the biggest thing is we've got a tool here and we're gonna describe it to you and its uses.
Outstanding. So, the other part of the world always that we have to think about is, how do you get these things paid for? And so, the last thing I'd really like to dig into with you guys is how do you think the development of new diagnostic and risk identifying biomarkers will be influenced dependent on whether or not payers, insurance companies, are compelled to cover the biomarker test for Alzheimer's, like the one that received the recent FDA approval? And I have a follow-up question on that also, but I just want to start there. How do you feel that that payer role, is that going to make an influence on how this goes with clinical trials also, whether or not they're going to be able to be used in the, we'll say the real world for someone to get diagnosed and then get access to treatments?
Should I take that one, Marcy?
Sure, go ahead.
Yep. Well, I do think that having strong payer acceptance of a cheap and easily accessible biomarker would definitely be a game changer, especially for the diagnosis and actual clinical practice of Alzheimer's disease. And while we wait for those important events to happen down the road, we're also optimistic and hopeful that if we show how these biomarkers can be cost-effective and reliable predictors of clinical progression in early phase research, it'll help set the stage for acceptance on a broader basis amongst the payer community and others. So while we wait for the payers to be fully accepting down the road, that'll be great. In the meantime, we still have options in earlier phase research to leverage these scientific breakthroughs, which subsequently then can provide a greater motivation for payers to make use of these and reimburse these techniques and technologies in everyday clinical practice.
Outstanding. And so, Garrett, piggybacking on that, do you think that if Medicare approves this, will that be a key benchmark in whether or not there's future government investment in additional biomarker research? Or do you think this is going to, stay in the hands of pharmaceutical companies themselves digging into developing these biomarkers? Or, what do you feel is that going to be that bridge of possible Medicare approval also?
Yeah, one theme of this conversation has been leveraging these biomarkers for a sponsorable clinical trial. But the question that we are all interested in getting to is how does this affect people who are suffering with Alzheimer's disease? One thing I know is that cheaper, more accessible biomarkers will be a much more compelling tool for Medicare and for the monitoring of Alzheimer's disease than those that are more expensive and less accessible. Alzheimer's disease is a really scary disease and it's a really burdensome one. And if we can decrease that burden and using a blood draw instead of a lumbar puncture or a PET scan, and it's cheaper and less expensive, these are things that will make a huge impact on those who are battling Alzheimer's disease and those who are caring for those who are struggling with Alzheimer's disease.
Outstanding. Well, I can't wait. This is going to be an amazing session. And if somebody has a question ahead of time, that's going to be a head scratcher. They want to give you some time to think about so they don't just hit you with it at the day of. How can they reach out to you in advance of the session? Can they find you on LinkedIn or where should they go to connect?
Well, sure. We're available on LinkedIn, but also we have a nice website and we can take questions there. But also both Garrett and I are pretty easy to find, and we'd welcome any questions in advance. And we promise to stand out in the hallways and talk for hours to everyone who's interested.
Outstanding.
So
well,
please come on by.
That's perfect. Thank you. And I wish you both the best of luck with your session at AAIC and really look forward to seeing more information coming out of your research. Thank you both for your time today.
Thank you, Marcy.
Okay.